Our late film, The Lady in the Van, is in 20 minutes here on BBC One Northern Ireland after the BBC News with Clive Myrie.
Further allegations tonight concerning a BBC presenter accused of paying a teenager for sexually explicit photographs beginning when they were 17. The claims in the Sun newspaper allege the unnamed male presenter paid the teenager tens of thousands of pounds. And there are questions tonight over the BBC's handling of the claims. Also on the programme, Rishi Sunak says Britain discourages the use of cluster bombs after Washington decides to send the weapons to the Ukrainian military.
The UK is signatory to a convention which prohibits the production or use of cluster munitions and discourages their use. We will continue to do our part to support Ukraine.
The family of the 8-year-old girl killed when a car crashed into her school says she was adored and loved by everyone. And British hope Katie Boulter is knocked out of Wimbledon by defending champion Elena Rybakina. Good evening. There are new allegations tonight concerning a BBC presenter accused of paying a teenager for sexually explicit photographs beginning when they were 17. The claims in the Sun newspaper allege the unnamed male presenter paid the teenager tens of thousands of pounds. It's understood the corporation is investigating the allegations, and the Star is currently not scheduled to be on air in the coming days. Well, our special correspondent Lucy Manning is here with me. Lucy, just fill us in on what we know about this story.
Well, we do have some new allegations from the Sun newspaper tonight that will appear in their paper tomorrow. But let's just start with what the Sun has been reporting. In the paper this morning, they allege that an unnamed BBC presenter was paying money to a 17-year-old that lasted over a 3-year period, so that person was 20 years old, money up to around £35,000 in return for explicit photos. And the family of that person have spoken to the Sun. They say that the money that that teenager was receiving was being used for crack cocaine. And they say that they complained to the BBC about the presenter's behaviour in May, and the allegation is that the BBC didn't properly investigate it. The new allegations, which will be in tomorrow's Sun, concern the unnamed presenter. The claim is that there was a picture of the presenter that the family of this teenager has seen with the presenter in his underwear. There are very, very serious questions for the BBC about who knew what, when, and whether there was a proper investigation into these allegations, because the family don't believe that there were. The BBC has said in a statement that it takes the allegations very seriously. It attempts to speak to those who've contacted them to get further details, but it points out that if it gets no reply or receives no further contact, that can limit, it says, its ability to progress things, but that doesn't mean inquiries stop.
This presenter is unnamed, but some BBC stars today have felt compelled to come out and say it's not them who are involved in all of this.
Well, what's been happening today is, I mean, frankly, it's been a social media frenzy with people on social media trying to guess, make false allegations about who it is. And some BBC presenters have felt the need to come out and say, it's not me. So we've had Rylan, we've had Jeremy Vine, both saying it ain't me. Gary Lineker also saying it wasn't him. Nikki Campbell and Jeremy Vine threatening people who had been tweeting about it with legal action. And it must be extremely disconcerting for other BBC presenters to have themselves connected with something that they are just not involved with.
Yeah, you've alluded to this, but there are questions for the way the BBC has handled these allegations.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think this is very serious for the BBC. Let's make no bones about this. The understanding is the presenter isn't due on air in the near future, but we haven't been told, and we have asked, we haven't been told by the BBC whether there has or hasn't been a formal suspension. The BBC will need to answer if the investigation should have happened sooner, if it should have been more thorough, and if it's fair to other presenters unconnected to this that their names are now sort of in the headlines. The Sun tomorrow says that there will be a probe by a senior BBC person, that they've already spoken to the family, the head of corporate investigations. BBC hasn't confirmed that to us, but it says that it will be following its internal procedures. MPs are already weighing in on this. Carolyn Dinage, the head of the Culture Select Committee, is saying the BBC clearly now has some questions to answer. The pressure is on its HR department. And I think this really does have the potential to severely dent the BBC's reputation.
Okay. Lucy, thank you. Lucy Manning, our special correspondent there. Rishi Sunak says the UK discourages the use of cluster bombs but will continue to play its part in supporting Ukraine. The Prime Minister was speaking after Washington decided to send the weapons to the Ukrainian military to help in their fight against Russia. The UK is one of 123 countries that have banned the controversial weapons. Our special correspondent, Frank Gardner, has more.
Cluster bombs, devastating when they explode on the ground, still dangerous when they don't. They're highly effective against infantry in the open, but so many later end up killing and maiming civilians, they're banned in most countries, including Britain.
The UK is signatory to a convention which prohibits the production or use of cluster munitions and discourages their use. We will continue to do our part to support Ukraine against Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion. We've done that by providing heavy battle tanks and most recently long-range weapons.
President Biden is said to have agonized for months over whether to agree to Ukraine's request to send it cluster munitions. Now he's given it the green light. That puts the US at odds with its NATO allies. This video appears to show a Russian cluster bomb attack on Kharkiv, and this was the aftermath of an attack on civilians in Kramatorsk. Both Russia and Ukraine already use cluster munitions, but the US decision has been widely criticized. Yet some military analysts see them as a necessary stopgap before Ukraine gets a resupply of artillery rounds.
To those allies, NATO allies, who are complaining or criticizing President Biden's timely decision to give these munitions to Ukraine, Ukraine has been crying out for ammunition for months. And if what Ukraine had wanted and Ukraine needed had been given right from the start, instead of the incremental drip, drip, drip approach that has characterized so much of the provision of capability, Ukraine might not be in the same position.
Today, President Zelensky marked the 500th day since the full-scale Russian invasion by visiting the recaptured Snake Island. He's vowed to regain all land seized by Russia. But Ukraine's counteroffensive is going slower than expected. The fighting is intense, but the map has barely changed. Ukraine needs to find a way through the Russian minefields, and it's hoping that America's controversial cluster munitions will be part of the answer. Frank Gardner, BBC News.
Let's talk to Gordon Carrera, who's in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Gordon, these weapons, they're controversial, but are the Ukrainians saying, look, we need all the help we can get if we're going to win this war?
Yes, Clive, I spoke to one of President Zelensky's top advisors about this today, and he told me that Ukraine needs all the tools it can get for its counter-offensive. He says cluster munitions are one of those tools, and they could help significantly on the front lines. Now, there's no doubt that this is tricky for Ukraine's allies, especially the UK, which has been at the forefront of sending weapons to the Ukraine, because it may complicate making the case for that, as well as the wider case to try and restrict the use of these cluster munitions. And Russia has tried to take advantage of all this by saying Ukraine's need for them is a sign of its weakness. But here in Ukraine, there are no regrets for pushing for months to get hold of these cluster munitions. And they say they provided written assurances to the US about how they will be used in order to restrict the potential risks to civilians.
Thank you, Gordon. Gordon Carrera there live in Kyiv. The family of an 8-year-old girl who was killed when a car crashed through the fence of her school in Wimbledon on Thursday have said she was adored and loved by everyone. Selina Lau died and several others were taken to hospital after the incident in the grounds of the Study Preparatory School. An 8-year-old girl and a woman in her 40s remain in a critical condition. Here's Aruna Iyengar.
All day long in the sun and rain, people have been coming. local people laying flowers, reading the messages, trying to make sense of what happened.
We know this school, we pass by it every day, and we see the children go in and out of the school, see all their happy faces, and it's such a tragic incident that happened, and it's so unfortunate.
Selina Lau was just 8 years old, described as intelligent and cheeky by her family. She was at an end-of-year party with her school friends on the grass lawn in front of her school. At around 9:30 on Thursday, a Land Rover burst through the school fence, injuring 16. Selina was killed. Another 8-year-old is seriously injured, along with a woman in her 40s. 16 people were taken to hospital. A 46-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. She's been released on bail until late July. The study school is known for its nurturing atmosphere. It's well known in the community.
Everyone here either has had children here or knows people who have children here or have had children here. My own daughter many years ago did some summer work here before she went to university, looking after the girls. So we all have some kind of connection here.
Among the flowers, messages from other schools, church groups, families and fellow pupils. The school says it's profoundly shocked by Thursday's events. The families affected are being supported by police liaison officers. Police have asked the public not to speculate on the cause of the incident. Aruna Iyengar, BBC News.
The Prime Minister insists any public sector pay rises have to be fair, affordable and responsible. Rishi Sunak says tackling inflation involves taking difficult decisions to benefit the country, and agreeing to excessive pay rises would be short-sighted. He's reported to be under pressure from members of the Cabinet to accept the recommendations of pay review bodies for salary increases of around 6%. Now, let's get more on the day's sport from Ollie Foster, who's at the BBC Sports Centre. Hi there, Ollie.
Evening to you, Clive. We're going to start with the tennis at Wimbledon, where the last British player in the singles draw, Katie Boulter, has been knocked out. She lost to the reigning champion, Elena Rybakina, in the third round. Here's our sports correspondent, Andy Swiss.
So who's for some late-night drama? It was nearly 9 o'clock by the time Katie Boulter strode on centre court for the challenge of her life. Across the net, the defending champion Elena Rybakina. But if Boulter was nervous, well, at first, she didn't show it. Rybakina isn't the world number 3 for nothing, though, and it wasn't long before she seized the initiative. She raced to the first set, 6-1.
Game and first set.
Boulter's uphill task now even steeper. Amid the struggle, there were moments to smile about.
That's it.
A beaming Boulter showing what she can do. But it wasn't nearly enough, as Rybakina wrapped up an emphatic victory.
Game, set, match. Rybakina.
Disappointment for Boulter and for British tennis. With just the first week gone, their hopes in the men's and women's singles are already over. Andy Swiss, BBC News, Wimbledon.
Well, it's been a good day for England's men and women in their Ashes series. The first 2 sessions at Headingley were a washout on the third day of the third test, but England's men still had time to put themselves in a really strong position against Australia. Here's our sports correspondent, Joe Wilson.
Hours and hours just watching the clouds. Covers on, covers off. Patience. It was worth it. Past 5 p.m, the first wicket of the day, the dangerous Mitchell Marsh gloved it to the wicket-keeper. Chris Woakes has enjoyed the resumption of his England career. The crowd especially appreciated the dismissal of Alex Carey for 5. They still don't like him much. OK. But Travis Head defied England's bowlers with some brave and brutal batting that could only remind you of one person. England's captain was watching, just hoping that Head would find a fielder. He did eventually, but he'd made 77, and Australia's second innings was done.
Well, check the sky. There's evening sun. We're playing on. Check the score. 251 for England to win.
Confident start from Zach Crawley and reward for those who'd remained in the stands. You know those outfits are so carefully planned. Ben Duckett is still there too. 224 more to win. We think the sun will come out tomorrow. Joe Wilson, BBC News, Headingley.
England's women have kept their Ashes series alive. They won at Lord's in the third T20 and now trail Australia 6 points to 4 in the multi-format series, chasing a revised target of 119 off 14 overs because of rain. Won by 5 wickets, the teams will now play 3 one-dayers. Mark Cavendish is out of his final Tour de France after crashing on stage 8. The 38-year-old broke his collarbone about 50 miles from the finish. He's retiring from the sport at the end of the year, which means that he won't now be able to break the all-time Tour record for stage wins. He's level on 34 with the great Eddie Merckx. It's the British Grand Prix tomorrow, and world champion Max Verstappen will start on pole for the 5th Formula One race in a row. But the biggest cheer at Silverstone was for British driver Lando Norris. He was quickest in his McLaren before being pipped by Verstappen in the final seconds of qualifying. George Russell and Lewis Hamilton will be 6th and 7th on the grid. England's footballers have won the European Under-21 Championship for the first time in 39 years. They beat Spain 1-0 in Georgia. Manchester City's Cole Palmer scored the... And that, Clive, is all your sport.
OK, Ollie, thank you. Ollie Foster there. Before we go, let's have a quick look at what's coming up tomorrow on Sunday with Laura Koonsberg.
I've come to London's bustling West End to speak to the Happy Valley star James Norton about his latest project that's soon to hit cinema screens. And with the economy looking increasingly choppy, we'll talk to the woman who wants to be Labour's next Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Hope to see you at 9 tomorrow morning, right here on BBC One.
That's to come, but that's it. You can see more on all of today's stories on the BBC News channel. But from me and the team, have a very good night.